Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I'm talking about Pikmin 4. I have played through a couple other Pikmin games, Pikmin 3 and Hey Pikmin, although I've never had the opportunity to play through Pikmin 1 and 2. Pikmin is basically a game where you play as a tiny astronaut exploring Earth, but it's well after the human era has happened. So basically there's a lot of relics left over from humans, such as devices like Game Boys and things like that, but there's no humans in sight. And this Earth is inhabited by these little creatures that are half creature, half plant called Pikmin. It is also controlled by a lot of scary looking animals that like to eat the Pikmin. And so you as an astronaut exploring this abandoned Earth essentially are teaming up with these Pikmin in order to perform certain tasks, such as collecting artifacts like fruit or Nintendo Switch Joy-Cons or rubber duckies and things like that, and you are collecting these treasures. You are also throwing these Pikmin at their enemies to try and take them down. They're kind of like ants where they all work together, and one Pikmin's not going to do much damage, but when you throw 100 Pikmin at a bug or something, they're going to do a lot more damage a lot quicker. So they kind of work together in order to defeat their enemies and to lift up objects. Obviously one Pikmin couldn't lift up a Game Boy, but maybe 20 Pikmin could. And so you're collecting these treasures, you're defeating enemies, and you're growing new Pikmin from pellets and insect carcasses in order to build up a Pikmin army. In this game, it's a little unique compared to the other Pikmin games that I've played in that you get to make your own astronaut character, and you're basically part of a rescue team. So you are assigned a space dog named Owachi, and you and Owachi are in charge of going and rescuing all of these other astronauts on this Earth that have been put into sleep stasis, and basically you don't have any way to get off of Earth. This game's also fairly unique in that there are a ton of these little astronauts that you can rescue. I believe there's about 50 of them in total. And so in previous Pikmin games, like in Pikmin 3, you are controlling 3 different astronauts, but there's not I think you're just basically trying to rescue Olimar. The third Pikmin is actually a lot shorter than this game as well. So Pikmin 4, it feels like all of these other Pikmin games combined in terms of gameplay and length and mechanics. This game's also a little different in that there's not really a time constraint for you to play through this whole game. From what I understand from Pikmin 1 and 2, you basically have a set amount of days that you need to collect enough resources in order to get your planet off the ship, or you die basically. And in this game, there's not that time constraint. There's still a day-night cycle, and so you basically need to do everything that you want to do within that day before the day turns to night, because at nighttime things get really scary. But in terms of how many days you can be playing this game, there is no limit. Now, there is one exception where you do get to play as a little side game as Olimar, and that's more of a traditional Pikmin game where you do have that time constraint in order to fulfill your requirement. That's almost its own game on its own. That's how big this Pikmin game is because in the main Pikmin game, it took me maybe almost 50 days in order to 100% complete the game. And this side Pikmin game with Olimar that you get to play as, you have about 15 days to complete all of the tasks. While the time constraint, at least from my experience playing through Pikmin 3, it never got to the point where I was close to meeting my demise because I was running out of time. But it is kind of nice playing through this game where I don't have that time constraint, and I can really spend my time exploring the environment, and I don't have that pressure weighing on my shoulder. It's kind of when if you've ever played The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, you have that day-night cycle, and it's always looming behind you. It always felt that way when I was playing through Pikmin 3. And so it was nice that they still had that mode for the people who like that kind of gameplay, but then in the main game, it's not looming, it's not stressful, Sure, it's stressful in other ways, whenever Pikmin die, it's really sad because they make this sad little noise and a little ghost rises from their corpse, and you feel so bad because you were the one who told them to jump in that animal's mouth. So it's stressful in that way, but in terms of the time constraint, not at all. That being said, this game really does emphasize using your Dandori skills. And Dandori is basically the art of using your time wisely and delegating what you want to do in that time and just being as efficient as possible. So in the third Pikmin, I actually kind of liked this better in Pikmin 3 compared to Pikmin 4. But in the third Pikmin, you are controlling 3 different astronauts. And so you can kind of like spread them out and delegate what each one is doing at the same time. And while this can feel a little complicated, I feel like I really got the grasp of it playing through Pikmin 3. In Pikmin 4, you are controlling essentially 2 characters. You're controlling your main character that you created, and then Owachi, the space dog. Now, Owachi can't do everything that your astronaut can, and vice versa. But I feel like there's not as much splitting of your time, and so it felt like you are mostly controlling one character, because you can ride Owachi, and there are certain cases when you need to ride Owachi, because Owachi can swim in the water, Owachi can do a little jump, and so there are sections when you need your main pilots all together at the same time. And so you really have to be really skilled with your Dandori skills in order to send your rock Pikmin to go destroy that wall. And while they're destroying that wall, you send your red Pikmin to go defeat this enemy, because they're good at fighting. And then you send your blue Pikmin under the water to gather up all the fruit that's sitting at the bottom of the water, because there are also different Pikmin that each have their own strengths and weaknesses. Now, unfortunately, in this game, you are only allowed to use 3 different types of Pikmin at the same time. You can always go to your onion, and your onion is like your hub that stores all of your Pikmin that you're not using at the moment. But in terms of having them out while you're exploring the area and performing tasks, you can only have 3 different kinds. So you need to be careful as to like what kinds you need for what certain tasks. Now, this game does have a handy feature where it can recommend the certain types of Pikmin that they think that you should keep with you, and so usually I just stuck with the recommended, unless I did come across an obstacle that could only be performed by a certain type of Pikmin. There are a ton of different types of Pikmin in this game. I feel like I didn't play Pikmin 1 and 2, but I feel like it's had every single type of Pikmin that has been introduced in the past, including the new Ice Pikmin. And Ice Pikmin are kind of cool because they basically have this new freeze meter, and so every time an Ice Pikmin like attacks an enemy or an enemy eats an Ice Pikmin, they will get frozen, which gives you extra time to launch your Pikmin at enemies and attack them. They also have the ability to freeze bodies of water, so you can just walk across the water, because only Ice Pikmin and Blue Pikmin are allowed to traverse across the water unless it's frozen. There's also a ton of different other Pikmin that each have their own strengths and weaknesses, and I feel like some of them went fairly underutilized because they were introduced late in the game, and you also need to find the corresponding onion color in order to grow more Pikmin of that type. So there are white Pikmin that are like immune to poison, there are like purple Pikmin that are really heavy, so they're good at like bringing down flying enemies, and I never found like the purple onion to grow my own purple Pikmin. The only way that I was able to gather those purple Pikmin are from underground areas. And so this is a separate section of the map when you're playing through Pikmin. Basically, how the level selection works is there's like, I think in total maybe 7 different levels that you can explore and collect resources and treasures and all that. But within these levels, there are also these little pipes that take you into these underground sections. Now, they are fairly separate from the regular world, and I feel like aesthetically they're a little more boring than looking at the overworld, because when you're in the overworld, you get to see like all these big plants, and you get to see it from a tiny little perspective, and while the underground still has like items and treasures that are huge, it doesn't have like that same feel as being like in a garden as a little tiny character. Visually, I think it's a lot more impressive when you get to see all the like giant plants looming above you. But the undergrounds do bring their own interests. Mostly the undergrounds are for like fighting big old boss enemies, and they're also for mostly like solving puzzles. They're more just like contained little areas. And in the these contained areas, you're not really collecting more Pikmin aside from set groups that will allow you to pluck them from the ground. The cool thing about these underground sections as well is that time passes at 1/6 the amount of speed, so you really don't need to hurry about doing everything you need to do before the end of the day because you have plenty of time in the undergrounds to solve all these puzzles. Another cool thing about this game is that if you do happen to mess up and you lose like your whole army of Pikmin, by the end of the game, you should have up to 100 Pikmin at one time. And there are times when you happen to mess up somehow and you lose all 100 of your Pikmin and you see 100 little ghosts fly up in the air and you just feel absolutely terrible. But no stress, you are able to rewind back to certain checkpoints. So if you do mess up, which by the end of the game I messed up pretty frequently, you can rewind. The end of the game is actually fairly difficult for me, at least. Now, Pikmin was never considered like a really hard game, at least playing through Pikmin 3 and Hey Pikmin. I never had too much trouble. It was mostly, hey, throw your Pikmin at an enemy. When they're about to attack, recall all your Pikmin back to you. But in this game, I felt like I encountered a lot more situations that required me to be a little more careful, to decide when I want to send my Pikmin out, where I want my Pikmin to navigate. And because I'm not that great at that, many innocent Pikmin have lost their lives, and I feel truly terrible about it. But I think that's just one good thing about Pikmin 4 is it actually requires you to think and be actively playing rather than just passively throwing a ton of Pikmin at the enemy and destroying them before they can attack back. You actually have to think about it a little bit, especially like some of those last bosses really knocked me out, and I had to rewind quite frequently in order to progress with little to no casualties. This game also introduces night expositions, and in previous Pikmin games, we needed to get all of our Pikmin into the onion and our spaceships safely off the Earth, because at night is when like all of the big bugs turn really scary, their eyes glow red, and they'll eat all the Pikmin basically. So in previous games, and in this game too, when you're playing through like a normal level, any Pikmin that are left over that are not with you when the day ends are basically considered lost. They're eaten. And so you really need to like gather up all of your Pikmin and get them in the onion. This game introduces night expositions in that you can use glow Pikmin, another new Pikmin, but they're only available at night or in the underground sections in most cases. And basically this kind of works like I guess you would call it like a tower defense game, but you're not really using towers to defeat enemies. It's more like a horde mode on Gears of War is the closest example I can think of, where it is nighttime, the enemies are scary, they have their red glowing eyes, and you need to use glow Pikmin in order to protect like a certain hub. And this hub, if you last throughout the night without the enemies destroying this tower, you gain a resource in order to cure some of these astronauts that are infected. Basically, these astronauts have been infected with like a Pikmin virus almost, where they turn all leafy and they can't really speak English. And so you need to make medicine to cure these astronauts that have been transformed. But in order to do that, you need to get the sap from these I forget what they're called, these little hub tower things. And so you're lasting throughout the night, and you're basically protecting these hubs using Owachi and the glow Pikmin. And most of these levels I didn't have any trouble with. However, a couple of the end levels were so difficult, and I felt like no matter how many glow Pikmin I had, I could not defend these bases. And thankfully, this game does have an option where if it's just too hard and you cannot do it, you can basically say skip this one, and you still get the rewards for it. It doesn't punish you at all. Basically, you have this like other astronaut do it for you. And so that last level was the only one where I actually had to do this, because I got so frustrated and I had to keep on rewinding, and I said, you know what, you just do it for me. And so I'm glad that it had that option, so I didn't have to keep banging my head up against the wall, because yeah, legitimately the end game, these night expositions and some of these last bosses are pretty tough. In addition to regular day expositions and night expositions. You also have that Olimar side mode that I talked about earlier, where you get to play as Olimar's backstory. You also can interact with all of these astronauts that you rescue, and a decent amount of them have side quests for you to do. And so they're pretty simple. Usually it's like, hey, bloom 300 Pikmin, defeat this many enemies, rescue these certain types of astronauts. And you're performing these side quests and you're getting this resource. And you're using this resource to upgrade your character, upgrade Awachi, upgrade these devices that help you basically navigate through these levels. You also, every time you rescue another astronaut or cure an astronaut, Awachi gets a point that you can use to upgrade Awachi. And by the end of the game, your space dog Awachi is like super strong. He can take down plenty of enemies on his own. And so it was fun having that like RPG mechanic where you are constantly upgrading and improving your characters, so then you really feel that progression, which is something that I felt was missing from the other Pikmin games that I've played through. I just love navigating through this world. It always has looked so realistic, these objects that you're collecting. Like in the third Pikmin, the fruit that you were collecting looked so realistic texture-wise, and this game is also no exception, where like you collect this shiny Game Boy Advance. They like to have a lot of like Nintendo products that you're collecting, and realistically all of these objects would probably be covered in like dust and have scuffs and be all damaged, because obviously this takes place like way after humans inhabited the earth. But no, these objects are always so like pristine and shiny and clean, and it looks so real. It's crazy how they managed to create these in a video game. And I always just like I said earlier, I like just walking around the level and seeing it from like an ant's perspective, this like almost garden kind of terrain. Even the water just looks so clear and pristine, and you can just see like all the ripples, and it's almost like you can see the objects underneath the water getting refracted. And so visually, I really enjoyed this game. Audibly, I also really like this game, where the music is sometimes kind of pleasant, and it's just like you're taking a stroll through the garden, but then when you're like facing off against a big old creepy insect creature, it sounds really intense. And I really enjoyed the music in this game as well. During combat, I definitely should have remembered to use items more, because they provide a lot of different items that you can use during combat. And in previous Pikmin games, I never used the items and I got along just fine. But in this game, I feel like I would have had an easier time if I did stock up on these items and utilize them to their full capacity. Because we have like bombs that take away enemies' health, and we also have like ways to freeze them in place, and lightning. And so if I had utilized items, I think I would have had an easier time late game. So definitely don't forget using items. I feel like this game did overstay its welcome a little bit. While I did have a great time playing this game, I usually get a little antsy around the 10 to 15 hour mark, and I start wanting to maybe play some other games. So think of it like a TV show. There's a TV show that you really like. If it has 10 seasons, you start feeling a little restless and a little bored and wanting to move on to something else. But I do like to only play one video game at a time, so I don't forget how to play and what I was doing in the story. And so I think another thing that escalated me wanting to move on from this game is about halfway into the game, it has this little fake out where you think it's the end of the game. They roll the credits, they show you the stats that you did, and then it's like a fake out, and it turns out there's more that you need to do. And that's only like halfway into the game. So while I thought I was done with the game, it turned out I was only halfway through. And so that's probably another reason why I got maybe a little impatient and ready to move on to something else, despite how great of a game this is. Another reason why I felt like this game may have overstayed its welcome is in Pikmin 3 and Hey Pikmin. Those games typically last maybe about 10 hours, and from what I understand, Pikmin 1 and 2 are no exception. These are shorter games, and they're meant to be kind of, after you play through them once, you're supposed to like speed through them and try to get like a better run time. This game takes maybe like 20 to 30 hours. By my true end stats, it turns out that I 100% completed this game. I got all the treasures, I rescued all the astronauts, and it took me around 26 hours, which is significantly longer than the previous Pikmin games. Which, like, if you don't mind a longer game, that's great news for you, because that just means you get to play more of this awesome game. I really did have a great time playing this game, and it is probably my favorite Pikmin game that I have played to date. Not that I've played through like a ton of Pikmin games, but I actually really did enjoy this game. I think I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5 just because time just seems to slip away whenever I do play this game. I'll sit down and it's always like that feeling of like one more day. Oh, there's more treasure I want to get. Oh, I wanted to explore that underground section. And it just kept pulling me in, and I wanted to just keep investing more time, and it's just so satisfying collecting these gigantic treasures or defeating these gigantic enemies, and it was very engaging and very fun. And if you've never played a Pikmin game before, this would be a great place to start. Well guys, that's it for me. Let me know if you have any questions or comments about Pikmin 4, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Bye!